So with how many franchises are marketed to us nowadays, there seems to be an overabundance of series and characters to enjoy. So chances are you're probably not going to be into just one, and you're more likely going to be into several and consume product from all of them. And with that, it seems like in recent years there's been a sort of pattern. For some reason, it seems that most people are into some franchises, and are then legally bound to be into others. Chances are, if you're into PewDiePie, you're into Markiplier. If you're into Marvel, then you're also into Star Wars. And if you're into Garten Banban, you're into The Godfather. You know, stuff like that. However, there's been a recent example of this that's really gone above and beyond in most people's eyes. One that transcends the rest and has become pretty much set in stone. And it's the connection between Sonic fans and Spider-Man fans. It's something that really has only come to light over the past year or two, likely with the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, which, you know, grossed $1.7 billion. Meaning that a lot of people ended up seeing it. And since then, we've gotten Across the Spider-Verse, which solidified the fact that any Sonic fan will eventually turn over to the other side. And that's what I'm here to do today, to dive deeper into this rabbit hole and see if we can find an answer to why this happens. And find out once and for all why there's so many Sonic fans that like Spider-Man. Yeah, he said it! So without any further ado, let's hop right into it. So for the sake of this video, I've divulged my reasoning into a few main points, to which we'll go in depth on each one, starting with the most simple one that I think sets up our whole timeline, being the timing of both franchises. Or more accurately, what both franchises have been popping off with as of late. As I was just touching on before, most of this connection stems from the release of Spider-Man No Way Home in December of 2021. Given how well received and loved that movie was, coupled with how much frickin' money it made, a lot of people ended up seeing this movie. It made a lot of casual Marvel fans into hardcore ones, my virgin self included. Most general Americans have been following the MCU for at least some time by now, especially after Endgame came out, and they had been well acquainted with the MCU's version of Peter Parker, and had probably seen some of the other live-action web-slingers at some point. And seeing this big finale and this spectacle alongside the other two Spider-Man and all the villains from the last movies really just hit home for a lot of people, no matter how much you'd even really been into the movies. And the previous year we had a very similar outcome with Sonic. After years of piss-poor games, we got the Sonic movie, which I don't need to tell you is pretty much the driving force that revived the Sonic brand into what it is now. It drove us out of the post-boom era and led us to a new future for the franchise, simply because of how many people saw it and adored this movie. And couple that with only a few months after the release of No Way Home, we got Sonic 2, which did pretty much the same thing as Sonic 1 but doubled the damage. And then all throughout 2022 and 2023, we've had even more awesome stuff throughout both franchises. Sonic Frontiers, Sonic Prime, mounds of awesome Sonic merch, and on the other side we had Across the Spider-Verse, which was pretty much just a phenomenon for kids my age. And now we have Spider-Man 4 on the way. And while yes, we did have Spider-Man comics coming out at this point, we don't actually talk about those. The point is, this is sort of our origin story for the phenomenon, and explains why Sonic fans / Spider-Man fans were introduced to one another, and how the sacred timeline crossed over. Loki, I'm telling you, Skibidi Toilet isn't real. He's not on the sacred timeline. It is, Mobius. He's coming. He's the one who remains. Moving on, let's look at the characteristics of both franchises to really see what makes these two click. First off, let's start with the general aesthetics of both franchises. If you really think about it, Sonic as a design is something that really couldn't be taken seriously under most circumstances, but somehow Sega's been able to pull it off and make it work. Like Sonic's cast on paper is a bunch of primary colored spiky blobs, with giant weird conjoined eyeballs, big floofy ears, and goofy ass noses. However, through cool storytelling and awesome game design, they were able to take a character that looks extremely cartoonish and goofy, like downright Mickey Mouse level, and create so many badass moments that just make you want to root for him, and turn Sonic into a complete badass. No, that doesn't mean this. And if you think about it, Spider-Man is a similar case. If we look at the mythos of Marvel heroes, you'll notice most of them try to go for some sort of aesthetic to them. By that I mean they all sort of try to reference themselves to some sort of specific look. For example, if we look at Captain America, he's very clearly supposed to be a US soldier, with military gear all over him, and him even having a utility belt and suspenders sometimes. And if we look at Thor, he's clearly supposed to be some sort of ancient god. Someone clearly supposed to be from some sort of ancient, faraway world, with a red cape and winged helmet and such. Almost every other Marvel character you can see has some sort of inspiration from a real-world type of outfit or person, and it shows clearly in their design. Now, if we look at Spider-Man, what is he really going for? I get he's supposed to be a wrestling outfit in a lot of continuities, but I mean, that really doesn't show that much in his final design. And it's really something you gotta be told about if you don't already know, since I don't really think it comes out in his final outfit that much. So Spider-Man's kinda just a bunch of random colors thrown together with some cobwebs and a logo, and some white lenses. But what they did made him look so damn cool. And if Spider-Man didn't have all the history and he was designed yesterday, he could probably be thrown into some random children's show or something and work pretty well as a design there, given his bright random colors. Point is, Spider-Man's design is inherently sorta goofy, but if you think about it, it's pretty much the same sort of concept as Sonic. This character that shouldn't be taken seriously all too much, given how wacky he looks compared to other characters, but give them the excellent storytelling and writing, as well as years and years of history, and you can turn any character into an absolute mad lad. I mean, if you take both Sonic and Spider-Man's designs, you can mess around with them, not really changing their core aspects of their design, and make them either look way more kid-friendly and wholesome, or absolutely merciless and murderous, just given how you draw them, since their designs are so basic and malleable. Obviously, these attributes aren't exclusive to Sonic and Spider-Man, as they're present in a bunch of different characters throughout fiction, but given on what I touched on earlier, this time span really let both fan bases see what kind of aspects are in store for each other. Moving on from design, let's get into the action, as the two surprisingly share a lot in common in this field. Right now, think about in your head Spider-Man fighting some goons in some awesome set piece. I'm assuming that right now you're thinking of Spider-Man swinging around and flipping off of buildings and stuff at super high speeds. Spider-Man just has this sort of grace to his movement, while most superheroes will probably use some giant elaborate weapon, or just flat out fly up in the air and have some sort of Superman air battle. Spider-Man doesn't have that sort of leverage. Spider-Man uses his environment to his advantage, and uses it to take out bad guys with ease and style. Who does this remind you of? Yeah, if you think about it, Sonic and Spider-Man have a very similar way of fighting. Neither of them have some sort of giant weapon they use to throw around. And before anyone says it, no, I'm not counting the web shooters, since I see them more as like a tool rather than just a flat-out weapon compared to something like Cap Shield or something. They have to use their bodies via outwitting and outmaneuvering their opponent, and they do it while looking awesome. And pair that with having terrain and set pieces that add to their powers perfectly, with Spider-Man having the tall buildings of New York City to swing and jump off of, and Sonic having loop-de-loops and turns all over where he can slam into his opponents. I would imagine these two fighting alongside each other perfectly well. I mean, hell, go play Sonic Frontiers and get in a boss fight, then go play Spider-Man PS4 and see how similar the two really are. And speaking of those games, the two just move around very similarly. I mean, obviously Sonic mainly uses the ground and Spider-Man uses the air with webs, but the two are just iconic for being able to move around the terrain at high speeds. Spider-Man usually outpaces cars tenfold when he swings around, while Sonic blazes past people and buildings as he gets to where he needs to go. Point is, the two get around very similarly. So people's brains who are already accustomed to imagining Sonic in a dope-ass scene, running super fast and knocking out bad guys, can pretty much just switch it out with Spider-Man in New York City and some goons, and you're pretty much good to go. Moving on though, we get to a more deeper point of how the two are alike, being their morals and storytelling. Sonic as a character is pretty much the exact same to Peter Parker mentality-wise. I mean, maybe not perfectly, but the two have pretty much the same goals and morals. They both protect their homes not because they want rewards or fame, but they do it because it's the right thing to do. Sonic does it because he hates bullies like Eggman, and wants to keep peace among the animals, or people, or little rock dudes, or whatever he's trying to protect. And Spider-Man does it because, say it with me, with great power comes great responsibility. Both of them do it out of a moral obligation, not because they want to show off or anything. I mean, Sonic does have a bit of an ego, but it never really affects what he does in most games. If it means life and death, it's not like he's not going to do it just because it's demoralizing. And Spider-Man will do it even if he gets cucked by the end of it. It's very clear the two agree on this front, and both have paid extreme prices in keeping their morals. And even besides that, the two just have very similar personalities. They both love spouting out quips during fights, and try to save their world while having fun with it. And occasionally getting so pissed they'll stop quipping entirely, and just go ham on whoever they're gonna fight. This is why people want there to be a Sonic and Spider-Man crossover game. Not because they think it would be fun to play, which it would be, but because the two characters would just mold into each other perfectly, with so many overlapping personality traits and morals. I'm sure if you put these two in a room together, they'd probably just have a blast, honestly. Just play some Mario Kart together and have a good time. However, I'd say that's pretty much all the main points for this topic, at least the big ones that I believe cause this phenomenon. So for now, I'd say let's just go over a few rapid-fire connections that don't really hold much water as the previous ones, but I just find to be really interesting and worth pointing out. Starting with how both franchises have had a lot of good action figures as of late, with Jack's Pacific Sonic line being an absolute godlike entity, without the possibility of being stopped, and Marvel Legends has been on good behavior as of late, at least for Spider-Man stuff. That's another Hasbro reference in the books, fellas. Then there's the fact that both characters have a main villain who's a giant, fat, bald man who has extreme resources under their belt, and have been shown to have a very high IQ and can outwit our heroes. And I guess while Kingpin is physically strong, Eggman makes up for it in his vast tech. I mean, take him out of his Eggmobile and Kingpin will wear his skin, but that's besides the point. And as a bonus, here's something I forgot to mention during the aesthetic section. The two have pretty much the exact same color scheme. I mean, if you take away the highlights from Sonic, they're almost the exact same. So there you go, there's my thoughts on what is quite frankly one of the most interesting and fascinating fandom crossovers I've ever seen. I've seen other things like Sonic and FNAF, where there's a lot of people I know who love both, but it's never been to the point of this extreme where like 9 out of 10 Sonic fans are being turned to the dark side. I mean, hell, I've even seen this being memed on Twitter before. And obviously that means it's huge, because Twitter never lies. And yeah, sorry if this video did end up being a bit shorter than usual, since I guess it turns out the answer to all this ended up being pretty simple at the end of the day. But anyway, I'd like to thank you all for watching. If there's any other really good points you find interesting, feel free to let me know in the comments. You guys are really good at pointing out random stuff I didn't even think about, so with that, I'm gonna go start work on my next video. Why Philadelphia Eagles fans love cupcake shops.